Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Coding Talks with myself Vishnu Viji. Today's episode I like to discuss about the different categories of migration that enterprises can undertake when they migrate their on-premises infrastructure and applications to AWS. The agenda of today's episode is to first understand the different categories of migration that organizations can undertake, and we also look into some of the services and tools which AWS provides for migrating the on-premises applications and on-premises infrastructure to AWS. Before we start the episode, a quick introduction about myself. I am a .NET developer from Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala state, working with different cloud technologies like AWS, Azure and GCP. I like to share and engage with community activities, and I am a AWS community builder from 2021 onwards, contributing to different community activities. Then the different talks and sessions are available on my YouTube channel and also on the podcast. So feel free to listen and watch from any one of your favorite platforms as you like. And thanks everyone for tuning into this podcast. This podcast is available on all platforms and on YouTube as well. Before on another update I'd like to share is AWS has a community builder program, and if you are a person who are interested in taking sessions or writing blogs or engaged in any one of the community activities, especially related to AWS Services, you can apply for the AWS Community Builder Program. Simply search about the AWS Community Builder Program, and applications are invited for twice a year, I believe, and twice a year or once a year, I believe. Exact details it will be available on the documentation page. If you are interested, you can apply for that, and it will be a great platform for you to connect with the different people that are inside AWS and also the different services about AWS. It provides a lot of benefits, so full details are available from the documentation, so please check it out. Okay, so let's start with the different categories of migration, especially the on-premises to AWS migration. So we will understand about the migration based on the 7 hours guide, which is actually a guide which can help to understand about the migration, and it's also a kind of a categorization. So if you relate, or you can relate any one of your migration or the enterprise migration with any one of these categories. We'll start off with the first one, which is called the rehosting. Rehosting means basically it's kind of a lift and shift migration. Long back when I worked with one of the legacy applications that was written in VB6, we didn't find any feasible solution in cloud at that time, and we had to rely on the lift and shift approach. Lift and shift approach or rehosting is simply identifying a VM in the cloud, in the AWS, which is the EC2, and then you will simply lift your existing applications from the on-premises and move that to the cloud. So the idea of rehosting is simply to find and map a compatible service to AWS, because not all AWS services are compatible with your existing on-premises applications, and maybe the organizations don't have enough bandwidth to work on re-architecting or refactoring the applications for cloud. In that case, the lift and shift approach will be the quickest and easiest approach. That is, they simply can lift their applications and host that on some instance like EC2 onto the cloud. The benefit they are getting is like it provides a way to move into the cloud, because by moving into the cloud, enterprises can take advantage of the economy of scale, high availability, lesser maintenance related to infrastructure, and also the different reliability aspects as well. And also many of the enterprises may not have enough bandwidth for maintaining their infrastructure. In that case, a lift and shift approach can be think of as a quick start when they move to the cloud. And it can also be think of as an initial starter into the cloud, and then organization can think about some other approaches like refactoring the applications. So one of the quickest example that you can think of this is, especially when related to AWS, is EC2 instance. You can simply spin up an EC2 instance onto the cloud, and then you can host your application onto the cloud. In this case, what you can understand is you are not doing any infrastructure maintenance or anything in the cloud, because AWS will taken care of anything related to the hosting of the EC2 and all. But this is not a full cloud native migration. Rehosting is just the beginning. So the idea is like the responsibility on your part will be high as an organization. You need to ensure that the EC2 is patched periodically to include all the features and updates. So it's the organization's responsibility in the cloud to update the EC2 instances. But the underlying infrastructure and maintenance will be taken care of by AWS. I hope that is clear. And this is one of the quickest and easiest approach, and also it involves very less development effort, because there is nothing major change you are doing, and also there is less risk of failure. Especially when the applications are migrated to cloud, organization, especially the different, have to comply with the different departments, and risk of failure is a common concern for many. And in this case, rehosting, there won't be any much failure or risk of failure which you can anticipate, because you're basically doing nothing, simply lift and shifting the application and moving that to cloud. So that's about the rehosting. Second approach is in the cloud migration category is replatforming. Replatforming means we have to first analyze our existing on-premises infrastructure and its application, and then to find some of the managed service in AWS. This can be think of as like the so in the initial approach we discussed rehosting. When I mentioned about the EC2 instances, in rehosting it will be like the applications will be shifted from the on-premises and hosted into the EC2 instance. Also, if there is any database or anything that is applicable for the existing on-premise infrastructure, that also will be lifted and shifted into cloud. That means installing a SQL server or Oracle server onto the EC2 instance, and then configuring all those things in the cloud. So that's about the rehosting. But the second approach which we are currently discussing about the replatforming, it involves identifying some of the existing on-premises services and map that to a compatible managed service on the cloud. This means instead of hosting the DB onto the EC2, you can take advantage of some of the managed service that are provided by the cloud. there are different relational databases and NoSQL databases provided by cloud. So you can take advantage of any of those managed. So this helps to avoid some of the overheads that are associated with managing a service. In this example which we discussed, the DB can be think of as like a managed service. You can rely on some relational databases like MySQL or SQL Server or Oracle or whatever, or even Amazon's own Aurora serverless or something, and can take some of the advantages, and the organizations can reduce some of the overheads associated with managing a service on the cloud. So this is a little bit better approach than the rehosting one. Okay, so I hope that is clear for you. Then the next approach is like the repurchasing. Repurchasing means this is applicable for enterprises, especially if they were using some kind of an applications like ERP or CRM or some form of a SaaS application on premise, and if they want to migrate that to AWS cloud, instead of lifting and shifting that on the cloud, AWS cloud on an EC2 instance, there is another approach. They can repurchase that application onto the cloud, from the cloud, provided if it is available on the marketplace. So how you can check is, you can first identify whether you are using any of such SaaS applications like ERP or CRM or any form of SaaS applications, and note it down and then check that on the AWS marketplace. Ideally, you will be find some of the compatible service there, and you have to repurchase that and use there. So the main benefit you are getting by moving this kind of a migration is that you don't have the overhead associated with installing the application there. Instead, you can simply purchase that and use that, and also it will make you an available and updated software, and it offers infinite scalability as well. In addition to that, just like we discussed the previous one about the replatforming one, and this one repurchasing one, the benefit you are getting is you can integrate with the other existing AWS services as well. For example, if you want to save something onto the storage service in AWS, you can do that. It won't be easy if you were on the on-premise systems. Now you have migrated in this form to AWS, and now you can take advantage of some of the different other integrated services that are available with AWS. So this is also applicable for the first one, initial one, rehosting, which we discussed as well. Even though I mentioned about simply we can lift and shift approach to there, it can also be think of as like an integration of different other services. Like even though you're hosting your existing on-premises application onto the AWS inside an EC2 instance, if you want to do some background processing or batch processing, you have a lot of options available that on the AWS cloud. So it's like the start, but it's the start of a migration, but it can offer a lot of gates to different lot of ways to different different ways to evolve your applications as you go on. So we have discussed so far 3 approaches like rehosting, replatforming, and then the repurchasing. Now we are going to discuss about the refactoring approach. Refactoring involves the most development effort, and it's a big decision which organizations needs to make before attempting. So the rehosted and repurchased or the replatformed application, so those all are the initial stages of the migration, and refactoring is like entirely breaking your monolith application into some form of a modular approach like a microservice or something. Because AWS offers a lot of services like asynchronous queues like SQS, then Lambda for serverless functions, then different container services like EKS, AWS Fargate, which all you can take advantage of when you move to cloud. When it comes to AWS Lambda, the asynchronous queue and all, the main thing is that your application should be architected in such a way that it should be compatible with all services, especially when it comes to the microservices. Like your existing application on premises may be a monolith application with a single code base. You can, when you move that to the cloud, you have the option to split it apart into more modular service, kind of a microservice architecture. And the benefit you are getting is independent deployability, less dependencies between each services, more scalability. If you want to scale on service, you can do that without affecting any of the other service. But the development effort will be much high, because in this case you have to re-architect your application into modular service, and also because you have different modular service, you can map each of these modules to different AWS services. Like AWS offers a lot of categories of service like database, storage, networking. If you want to have some storage service available from the cloud, you can take advantage of the S3 one. Then relational database is available, NoSQL database is available. The networking also, different services are available, load balancer services are available. Then security wise, if you want to have some tight security with IAM or roles with other services, you can have that in the AWS. So mainly when an architect refactors the service from a monolith to modular service, mainly it involves the breakdown of services into based on the different business domains. So they will do an activity like event storming, or identify some of the changeable areas and make them as a module, independent modules, so that it can be deployed without affecting other service. And the different services from the AWS can be leveraged, and it can help to form different kinds of architectures like asynchronous architectures, or maybe event driven architecture, where an event can raise a series of workflows and then it can be done. So it's a modern approach. So that's one of the goal also in the cloud migration, because this form of migration, refactoring, offers the maximum cost benefits, and it makes the application much aligned with the cloud services. So even though you will be rehosting or replatforming or repurchasing, at some point of time you need to refactor your applications, especially if it is a monolith and if it has a lot of dependencies, and if your application needs to be evolved. Okay, I hope that is clear with the refactoring. If you are interested in learning more about the different refactoring, you can check out the different microservices architecture and event driven architecture. There were a few sessions that I took in the last year about the microservices architecture. It can be considered of as a starter to understand more about the microservice architecture and event driven architecture, and the services that are applicable in this case will be like queues and notification services from AWS, then the container and serverless services from the AWS. So we'll discuss all that in a different session when we talk about the serverless components. Okay, so next we can look into another one, which is called the relocating. This is not quite common, but relocating kind of migration is applicable mostly for organizations which are leveraging much on the virtualization softwares like VMware. On the on-premise environment, maybe they were using some form of a virtualization software like VMware, and they could have a lot of applications on that VMware on the on-premise environment. And what they can do is they can take advantage of the cloud, AWS, because AWS introduced the VMware service in AWS in 2017. So what these organizations who were having on-premises applications on the on their on-premise systems, then they can simply move that to lift and shift onto the VMware, and the benefit, and they can take advantage of some of the benefits that are offered by the cloud, like the reliability, security, scalability, and also mainly the integration with other AWS services. And it can also be think of as like a starting point where they can say that they are moved into the cloud, and they can avoid some of the infrastructure cost associated with the on-premise systems. Now, we have discussed around 5 of the different approaches so far. Starting with the rehosting. Now, even though we will be migrating, the organizations will be migrating all their applications onto the cloud, still there are cases where some of the applications may not need a migration, and it will be work better if they are hosted on premise, especially due to compliance requirements or some form of an application which requires low latency processing, mostly at the client end. Then migrating to cloud may not be required. In that case, AWS offers different forms of services, like AWS on the on-premise systems. They can take advantage of the storage gateway, and they can integrate their on-premise system into the cloud. So they can extend, if they want to do the processing onto the on-premise and they want to store something like an extended form into the cloud, through storage gateway they can connect to the cloud and achieve that. In addition to that, there are also a lot of the hybrid services that are offered by AWS, which can be installed on premises, especially the different services which should be working environment which doesn't have any connectivity or anything. So AWS offers services for that. So retaining the existing on-premise systems as it is also a kind of can be considered of as a kind of a migration, because the organizations can extend their on-premise system onto the cloud, because cloud also offers a hybrid model. AWS understands the different needs of the organization. Some require moving to the cloud, but not all applications need to be in the cloud. Some will be working better in the on-premises as well. In that case, the retaining the existing infrastructure as it is will be the most beneficial, rather than moving on to the cloud. Okay. Then the final one which we are going to discuss is the retiring of the applications. So when you start migrating your on-premises, you will be assessing all the different applications that you have on-premise, and during the assessing phase and also during the migration phase, you will come to a point where you will be understanding that some of the applications are no longer required, and you can simply turn it off. So that's called the retiring, simply the retiring. So we have so far discussed about the different approaches, like starting with the rehosting, and then we discussed about the replatforming. Replatforming means we are moving the existing applications, on-premises applications, to some form of a managed services. Then repurchasing we discussed, where we will be purchasing a compatible service on the cloud from the marketplace and consume that, especially the SaaS or CRM or ERP applications. Then the most development involved development involved form of migration, like the relocating, where existing monolith applications are splitted into different form of services or modules to take advantages of the cloud's asynchronous and event-driven architectures. Then as an added benefit of the migration, we will be coming to a stage where we will be aware about the different applications which can remain on the on-premise as it is and can be extended onto the cloud, and also the plan where we can retire some of the existing applications which are no longer required at all. The retiring of applications make more sense if you refactor the application. Especially when you refactor the application and make it more modular, you will come up with the better architectures, and you can retire some of the unwanted services which are no longer required at all. So far we have understood the categories of migration based on a guide called the 7 R's. So all the different categories are starting with R, the letter R, which make it easier to understand. And now the next thing which I like to discuss in episode is mainly about the different stages or approach to migration. So we have understood the different categories of migration, but how you can start with the migration. So that's the next thing I like to discuss. And we start with the assessment of the existing on-premises architecture. So your organizations or the existing enterprise might have an on-premise infrastructure. First, assessing about the existing infrastructure will be much beneficial, and this can help to come up with an effective business case that can help with the migration. Some of the services that AWS offered with related to assessing the applications is AWS Migration Evaluator, and another one is the AWS Migration Hub. So AWS Migration Evaluator, this is actually initially developed by TSA Logic, and AWS acquired that in 2019. So this tool is actually free, and it provides a mechanism to help you to baseline your on-premises infrastructure. So you can identify the cost modeling and different data analysis. So what you do is you install that on the local on-premise servers. Especially the migration evaluator can use the VMware systems using a agentless model where it can identify the different capacities of the existing system, and then it can suggest a more better compatible service in the AWS. So the migration evaluator, it's basically focus on the understanding basically the existing, the compute, storage, and the different licenses, especially the Microsoft licenses on the existing on-premise system, and it come up with a report to identify which AWS services can be leveraged for that. So as per the documentation, if you effectively use this one, around 50% of cost can be reduced in the cloud by this one, and this is basically an agentless collector where it is more compatible with the existing on-premises systems which have a VMware or vSphere systems associated, and it will be it will be run on there. Ideally every 2 weeks this can be run to come up with an accurate picture of what all different requirements are there in the on-premises system, and then a report can be downloaded from there, and which can help in the to identify the existing usage patterns. More information about the migration evaluator can be found from the AWS documentation. This migration evaluator actually connects with the migration hub. Okay, and then it further helps in migrating the applications. So the migration hub is the next service, which is also free, which is provided by AWS. So this one, the migration evaluator can collect the details on your on-premises system and come up with a different metrics and other things, and which can then be communicated and connected to the AWS migration hub. Then regarding the AWS migration evaluator, if you want more help regarding the existing on-premises migration, then AWS provides an account manager who can help with these things. So more details about the migration evaluator you can check out on the AWS documentation. So this is in the assessment stage. We are just identifying what all applications or how we can better move that to the AWS cloud. Then the migration hub is the another service which comes next, and it provides a kind of an overview, mainly a dashboard overview of the migration project. So this is the main area of the migration. This can help to discover and migrate the existing different on-premises services that are available in different locations. This is especially useful for organizations where they have multiple on-premises in different regions, multiple on-premises infrastructure and services in different region. So it acts like a central hub and a dashboard for your entire migration projects, and it can be accessed from your AWS management console as well. So this can be very useful for organizations for discovering and managing the migrations, and also it integrates with the one which we just discussed, the migration evaluator. And also it can help to track down the migration, what all services are migrated and all. Then it has service integrations with the different on-premises systems, like it allows to import the data from the on-premises data and services using the migration hub import, which is a kind of a service integration within the AWS migration hub. Migration hub import service integration allows you to import the data from the different on-premises data and services. Then it can also collect data from the migration collector, then agentless discovery connector from the VMware workstations or vSphere it can collect, and also some applications, some on-premises systems may not be using the VMware or vSphere. In that case, an agent is also, application discovery agent is also available, which can be installed on the on-premises system to to know more about the system, and then what it can do is like all these are different data from different areas, just like collecting the different data from different IoT devices to a central hub. The migration hub can collect the data from different areas, especially different on-premises systems, and then it can provide us a dashboard in such a way that it will help us to understand what all on-premises servers we have, how much so far we went with the migration and all, and detailed analysis of that. Then the second thing which like to after the assessment stage, the next stage is like the mobilize stage. Mobilize stage means we will come up with a more detailed about the different on-premises services and infrastructure we have, and there the main services which we use are AWS Application Discovery Service and Control Tower, which collect the different application behavioral data, and it can also send that to the migration hub. Then the AWS Control Tower can be think of as like as a way for useful in case where the organizations have multi-account systems. So in that case, AWS Control Tower can be configured in such a way that the multi-account landing zones can be created, and based on that they can configure the different approaches for the different multi-account environment. So that's an kind of a different approach where it provides a kind of a blueprint, like root OU, core OU, and different custom OUs, and different logs are collected on areas, and then it forms a way to migrate. But it has to be done in a proper way, that if using the AWS Control Tower, we shouldn't delete any of the existing configurations that are provided by the control tower, because if you alter any of those different templates that are provided by the control tower, it will essentially make the migration or the control tower work in a different way. So have to be very careful when making changes to the control tower configurations. So we were discussing about the different phases. First, we assess the applications, and when we think into the next stage of the mobilize, where we will come up with a detailed analysis of the existing applications. We discussed about the control tower and also the AWS application discovery service in that case. So the idea here in these two stages is to identify the existing infrastructure in more detail. Next, the migrate and modernize is the final stage of migration, where using all this information and by using some of the tools and services that are provided by AWS, we migrate the actual applications and data onto the AWS systems. So the idea is, finally, once the migration is over, we can entirely cut off the existing on-premises system. So it has to be done only after testing the migration is completed properly. The final stage of migration, we could depend on a lot of tools and services, like the AWS application migration service, which is one of the service provided by AWS. Then if you want to migrate data, there are a lot of data migration tools that are provided by AWS, including transfer family, data sync, storage gateway. Can be think of as an endpoint which can be connected to the AWS storage services, and also cases where you want an offline transfer of data to AWS can depend on the AWS Snowball devices as well. So when in the final stage of migration, it involves migrating the applications, servers, infrastructure, databases and all, and AWS application migration service is the first service which comes into that stage. And it can be think of as a service. AWS application migration service is actually free, and it can be think of as a service with minimal disruption, such as SAP. If you want to migrate some of the existing on-premises workloads in SAP, Oracle and SQL Server, it can be converted to this is using the application migration service. So you can convert your existing physical and virtual machines to run natively on AWS infrastructure using an agent. So the first step involves in the application, the migration service, is to first set some of the replication setup on the on-premise. So you will be setting up a staging area, instance type, then EBS volume type and EBS encryption type and everything, and then you will install a replication agent on the on-premise system, and then it will do the migration from your existing on-premise systems to the server. So that's basically about can think of as a like our on-premise system. It identifies the on-premise system and then move everything from there, the workloads and everything from there into a compatible EC2 service in AWS. So that's one form of migration, application migration service. So it's kind of basically doing a lift and shift where it will be migrating the existing one to the AWS. So this helps to migrate with minimal disruption. So if you have existing SAP, Oracle or SQL Server on your on-premise systems, this can help to migrate that. Then second one is the database migration, where you want to migrate your on-premise databases to something compatible that in the cloud. So here this can help you to migrate your relational or NoSQL database, and also if you have a warehouse in the on-premise, that also can be moved into the cloud. Also there are cases where if you can re-architect, then you can move your existing multiple databases onto a data warehouse in cloud as well, using the AWS database migration wizard. This is kind of a very flexible service. They say AWS database migration service is kind of a very flexible data migration service, because you can convert your existing data from a same DB type, that means from an SQL database type to in a destination type, like the SQL server on the AWS, or MySQL from your local MySQL to a compatible MySQL service on the AWS. It can also help to migrate data from one type of applications to another. So it's kind of a configuring the source and destination. And in majority of the cases, what it does is like it will create this AWS database migration service will create a kind of an instance. Basically it will be an EC2 instance and do the migration. And if it is a same database type, like a SQL to SQL or Oracle to Oracle, then it will do the migration in a less friction way. But if there is a change, especially from one type to another, or if there is a compatibility change there, then you may have to use a different service called the schema transformation service, or AWS SCT, which should be used in conjunction with the database migration service to do the migration. So when you use the AWS SCT or schema migration, schema conversion tool, it does a conversion of the existing schema, which can be compatible with the target AWS type. So so this is one kind of this way you can so we discussed so far the in the final stage we discussed about the application migration service, where you can migrate your existing instances especially to an EC2 or something, and also database related services you can convert using the database migration service. Then there is another one service which can be think of as a kind of a migration helper service, but also can be think of as a supporting migration service, especially when you move to cloud, which is called the AWS Service Catalog. Basically it's like a organization tool developed with the purpose of provisioning and creation of stacks, IT stacks by the admins, and then it can be used by other destined people or respective people in the organizations to provision. So it's act like a kind of a approved catalog which they can use for provision, and this can help into maintaining the best practices and system security, which is a key component of any migration activity. So this AWS service catalog can be think of as like a pre-approved software list which can help other teams to use and provision, and it involves it can ensure the best practices and the confidence within another team. Then there are certain other services as well which can help in migration. Before we winding up the episode, we will discuss about that. The AWS Data Sync is one such service which can help to migrate, manage and move data between storage services. Like if you want to migrate from S3 to EFS, it can use that. So basically it creates different VPCs and endpoints. It can use different VPCs and VPC endpoints associated with those respective services. So if you want to move the data sync can be used to move the data from S3 to EFS or EFS to S3 or something like that, and it basically has encryption in data during the transfer and also in the rest. In addition to encryption, it also has the data validation, which ensures that the data remains correct once it reaches the target. So this can be simply think of as like if you want to have some requirement to move data between multiple services within AWS or from the on-premises, data sync can be used for that purpose. Then there is a specific one called the AWS Transfer Family, which can help to move the data from S3 to Amazon EFS. The data transfer, one of the benefit with the transfer family kind of services is it just uses the FTP and the SFTP. So there is no provisioning of any services in AWS is required for moving the data transfer. If you think about the different other services which helps in migration, like the database migration or application migration, there will be an associated in between EC2 instance used for doing the migration, or some form of other services which will be used to do the migration. But when it comes to the transfer family, AWS transfer family, it just uses an SFTP to transfer the data from S3 to Amazon EFS. Then, like I already discussed a few minutes before, there are organizations which wants to transfer data in an offline way, especially if they want to transfer huge petabytes of data from either on-premises system to AWS or vice versa, reverse as well. In that case, different Snow family devices can be used. There are different categories of Snow family device: Snow Cone, Snowball and Snowmobile. And here the data transfer is done with a physical device. Snow Cone is the smallest one, which supports up to 8 TB of data transfer. And Snowmobile supports up to 100 TB. And likewise, there are different services out there. Then previously we discussed about a hybrid approach where some organizations, I think while we discussing about the retaining the in the initial discussion, we talked about the different categories of migration and retaining the some of the existing systems as it is may be feasible for some organizations. In that case, they can extend their services onto the cloud with the help of gateway services like storage gateways. So basically what they do is they can install the storage gateways onto their VMware on hypervisors, and or on the Amazon side it can be installed on the EC2 systems, and this storage gateways act like a gateway to connect the on-premise system to the AWS, so that in case if you want to store some backup, the organization wants to store some backup or something onto the AWS storage service, they can do that with the help of storage gateway. So there are different kinds of gateways out there. file gateway there, stored volume gateway there, cached value gateway is there. Stored volume gateway, it simply backups to S3 and it's asynchronously backups to S3. And cached volume, it uses a buffer, local storage from the on-premises as a buffer, and then it moves that to the cloud. So gateways can be think of like a kind of an extension onto the cloud. So in this way, we have discussed the different migration approaches. So this is just an overview about the migration, but this will help you enough to get started. And we started with an understanding about the different categories in terms of the 7 R's, where we understood about the different approaches that enterprises leverage or take into consideration when they move that to cloud. If you not think in that terms, basically when someone understand about migration, it will be simply think of us like a code change and moving that to migrating to the cloud. But code change is actually worth the effort. It actually make the applications and infrastructure more compatible with the cloud and more cost effective in the cloud. And there are arguments in favor says that only if you fully migrate that to a cloud native application, then only you will get the full advantage of moving to cloud. But we also need to understand that enterprises leverage different other approaches like rehosting, replatforming. Those all can also be think of as a kind of a migration. It depends. There are subjective arguments there. What it matters is the rehosting and replatforming. Those all act like an initial stage of migration where they can move to the cloud, but refactoring or re-architecting the monolith application onto the cloud actually makes more sense when it moves to cloud. But it involves a lot of development effort and a lot of time and effort of developers. It will consume, and so it's a major decision business needs to take care of when they want to migration. In addition to that, we also discussed about some of the marketplace services that are available in AWS, which can help you to purchase and take advantage of those SaaS applications in the cloud. Then a lot of organizations use VMware, and if they hosted their application onto a VMware client, they can migrate to cloud same way, taking advantage of the features of cloud by using the VMware on AWS, which was introduced in 2017. Then finally, we saw a lot of services like there are a lot of services we discussed, but if you want to a quick understanding, you can think of like this: assess, more detailed assess, and then finally implement the actual migration. So in the final stage, you will be using a lot of AWS services plus the data from the analysis services, especially the data evaluator services, and the migration hub can be think of as a dashboard which can help to connect the different services, especially if your organization has a lot of on-premise systems in different areas. Then the migration hub can be utilized with its service integrations to connect the different data from different endpoints. It can be from application discovery service. It can be from migration evaluator. It can be from the migration evaluator based on the agentless collection of data. So here two important things you needs to understand. There are two kinds of data collector or discovery service: agent and agentless. Agent essentially it means like it uses an application like application discovery service or something to collect the data, while the agentless is actually only available in VMware virtual machines, provided if you have the same on the on-premises systems. And if you install that, that's basically an agentless collector which can be installed on just the main VMware system, and then it can collect all the associated interconnected VMware details, which can then be encrypted and passed on to the AWS Event Hub. So all of these services, the data migration supported services, when they move data from one services to another, it can be it is by default it will be encrypted in transit and also at rest, and then it uses AWS suggests some of the compatible services which can you leverage in cloud. So this will be more applicable if you do rehosting and replatforming. This identifier service and other will be more applicable. If you want to do a full conversion of a cloud native migration by re-architecting, then these initial phase services and tools may have limited roles in that case. Other than identifying the existing infrastructure. Still it provides a baseline for the existing infrastructure, but mainly it will be more useful if you want to do a lift and shift migration. Some of these services will be more applicable. So that comes to an end of a discussion on today's episode, and thanks everyone for listening this podcast, and feel free to share your suggestions or any opinions you can either respond that to in the if you are using Spotify you can respond that, or on the YouTube you can revert back with the comment section, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. So thanks everyone. Have a great day ahead.